Home buying in California? It's more than just a dream. Record prices, confusing rules, limited inventory. But you don't have to go it alone. Our team breaks it all down, step by step.
You can have situations where, let's say you put 10% down, you've got good credit.
20% of agents do about 80% of the business.
Having a high turnover of renters in an area.
You have more freedom to there. You don't have to go through approval with anybody but the city.
Thousands trust us to make their home ownership dreams real. Meet the experts ready to guide you tonight.
Hello, everybody. We are live here at the official Bay Area Home Buying Workshop. Thanks, everybody, for being here. You can see our esteemed panel that's sitting on here, Chris, Shannon, and myself. I'll give a little bit of background here on everybody. But we just wanted to say here that, whether you're a first-time home buyer or you're really looking to expand your real estate portfolio, this comprehensive workshop has been designed to equip you with the knowledge and the tools that you need to navigate any real estate market confidently at all. So a little background. So Shannon and Chris, both senior real estate agents and members of the team, both been in the business for several years, have seen all sides of what can happen in a buyer transaction and what we should know inside and out through the buyer transaction. Myself, I have been in the business for 28 years now, second generation realtor coming through the process, and just been very lucky to be in this business industry here in Santa Clara County. So let's start about the seminar itself. The workshop itself is, see that, guys, workshop. So starting with the workshop itself, our goal is to get you out of here in 60 to 75 minutes top. So we'll also host a Q&A at the end coming through there. And if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to drop them right there in the chat, right? And send it to everyone when you do that in the chat. So stay tuned at the end, and we'll give you all how to stay in the know in the future. So once you're watching this, we'll show you later how you can stay up to date on everything that we're sharing and what's happening in the market and all the latest changes that come through there. So one small but very important request. If you find this workshop informative, please share it with others. So all of our future dates are going to be shared at the end of today. Okay, excellent. So Chris, Shannon, you want to say anything to introduce before I go over the topics we're going to cover today?
Oops. Shannon might be muted.
Yeah, Shannon, I can't hear you, but Chris, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'll take over really quickly. Just, introducing myself over here. I'm a third generation real estate agent. I've worked with hundreds of clients coming through the Bay Area, having fun with get a little reverb there. Having fun with the ins and outs, left and right. But just a little bit about me. Went to school in Santa Cruz, studied psychology and business, and just enjoy navigating through the real estate process. So.
Awesome. Perfect. Shannon, I see you're ready to go now.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We got you.
Awesome. Cool. I just want to say hello and welcome everybody. Looking forward to doing this.
All right. Let's do it. So let's get started with what we're going to be covering with topics today. So just to give you a basis on what we're doing topics, we're going to talk about the current market conditions and trends, how commission works as a home buyer. If you're not familiar, there were changes last year to how that works. So we'll go over that. Just some mortgage basics for the Bay Area, how to get into it, how to get started, the home buying journey really from start to finish. What is that process? What does it entail? We'll give you a good snapshot of that as well. The bonus that we've added to the workshop this time is some different methods on how to hold title that you might find very interesting. Then we'll go over one of everybody's favorite negotiation strategies and how to position yourself for the best deal on a property. And then we'll break down into some tips for evaluating properties in neighborhoods like a pro would as well. And then the last part that we'll finish with before the Q&A at the end here is understanding and avoiding common first-time home buyer mistakes. So you'll see a couple different things following us on social media and stuff on there. Feel free to click those QR codes if you want more information. And we'll have more stuff for you at the end. So let's jump into the real estate market. This is always the big question that we have is about the market. So a couple things that I wanted to touch on here. If you've attended some of these workshops in the past, we've changed the format a little bit here. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with prices, what's the overall factor of what's going on, what are the facts that are happening in the market right now, and what are the water cooler overreactions? All those things you hear from friends and family and coworkers that are scary, but they're a little bit of an overreaction. And then just kind of go with the big picture. What's going on right now? Having all the experience we do, what would we do if we were buying a house today? So nationally, I just wanted to touch in on the market nationally. After years of intense bidding wars, soaring prices, we've seen that all over for the last few years, ever since the pandemic. The national housing market in 2025 nationally finally hit the brakes. So home values are nearly flat, inventory is climbing. We're seeing a little bit of a slowdown. In some areas, there's even a drop. So now this is actually healthy with what we've been seeing over the last few years. So it's a nice thing to see. Locally, here in Silicon Valley, if I'm talking just about Santa Clara County right now, the real estate market in 2025 has actually shown a lot of resilience with everything that's happened and even some moderate growth, which is bucking the national trend that we've seen of stagnation. So listing inventory itself has increased compared to the last few years, but this is something that's pretty interesting. It's down 20% from its peak in April this year. So, and that has to do with pending sales, because pending sales are actually up from April, and competition remains very high for well-presented properties. So if a property shows well, priced well, we're actually still seeing multiple offers right now. And we've seen that start to come about in the last couple months of the market. So what are we seeing overall happening with prices? Nationally, again, home prices are overall flat, but they still have slightly appreciated. So a lot of what you're hearing in the narrative out there is that prices have slowed, price growth has slowed. And that's all true, but a lot of people are taking that for prices are going down. What is really happening is just appreciation percentages are slowing. They're not going up as fast as they have the last few years. And again, that's very healthy. So here locally in 2025, prices hit a peak in May. That's when we saw the highest sales prices of the year. And those are technically April sales. So anything that closed in May went under contract 30 days previous. So then the average median price, average sales price for Santa Clara County decreased 3 months in a row after everything came out about the tariffs and how the economy responded to all that. After that, we saw all of that happen. So then in September, we started to see a jump again. So the latest numbers that just came out, literally yesterday, we had access to the September final sales prices, is we are now just 3% below the peak. And it's interesting that we're up 7% from June. So you saw that reduction come down about 10% overall on what was happening with the average sales price in Santa Clara County between the tariff time to the middle of the summer. But now we've already recuperated 7% of that. So by the end of the year, based on what we're seeing, I wouldn't be surprised if we see that to continue to go up. So, and we are up still year over year. So those are a couple of the basics as far as prices go. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you have questions, just shoot them in here for me. Now the facts overall, mortgage rates, they briefly increased after September 17th when they had the Fed meeting. We saw them go up a little bit, but the 30-year fixed rate has since dipped slightly. So, which has offered a lot of relief to buyers at the same time. And then the purchase mortgage activity. So this is interesting. So loan applications, the purchase activity, that's grown another 2 to 10% since that time, depending on what area that you're in. But we have seen several weeks, I think we're at 7 or 8 weeks right now, of continuous year over year growth of loan applications. And what that means is those are buyers that are preparing to come back in the market. So that's showing activity. It's usually a good precursor of what's ahead the next 30 to 90 days for what we see there. So those are kind of the facts as to what we're seeing right now. There's a couple overreactions that we've seen out there and a couple issues of fear for people. So one of the ones is surging inventory and hearing that buyers markets are everywhere. That is drastically overblown. There's a lot of numbers out there that you can see to look at it. While inventory is indeed up in some regions and price reductions are more common, many areas like ours are still lagging way below the pre-pandemic inventory. As a matter of fact, we have almost an inventory crisis. So seeing some increase in inventory has been a good thing in our area. So that's the one thing about inventory when you're seeing that. The second big one that I want to talk to is especially relevant in our area, and it has to do with the H-1B visa. So, and the $100,000 executive order by the president, right, that affects new H-1B applicants and individuals seeking to enter the United States who have not previously held that status. And this is the part that's really important. It does not impact workers that are already inside the U.S. and in lawful H-1B status, or those with a pending petition that was before the effective proclamation date, which was September 25th is the date that hit. So that's something to pay attention to. If you want more details on that, we're actually preparing a video to come out about that so you can have more details, or just reach out to any of us and we can help you with that. So, and then the last one that I wanted to get through, which was the latest Redfin report on numbers, inventory to pending sales and the gap that was in there. And you saw a lot of people, especially on YouTube, put some doom and gloom stuff to the numbers. So, and to talk about, oh, geez, we've got another housing crash that's coming this year based on what the numbers that were coming out. So please read what Redfin says, read what's in there, pay attention to what they say, because the Redfin economists, they actually emphasize that the market is recalibrating, not crashing. And they also emphasize that there's stable year-over-year price growth and relatively very, very, very few signs of widespread distress that we saw in 2008. So those are kind of the bases on there. So whenever you see something that's a headline, read all of it, check it out. That's one thing I've learned in all of these decades in real estate. Headlines sell. It's the meat of the information that is what is important. So make sure you're digging into that and finding that out. So the big picture, what we see now, what might be next. Everybody's talking about interest rates coming down. I know we've been talking about that for years. They are the lowest mark they have been in a while right now. And there's continued talk that they'll come down towards the end of the year, maybe even into next year as well. Right now, we're sitting right around 6.5%, give or take, a little higher, depends on the day. But the magic number everybody's talking about is 6%. So if we see 6%, happen, then we're going to start to see probably a rush of buyers. There's a lot of buyers sitting on the sidelines waiting. They're already starting to come out, as we've seen with the loan applications going up. So when that happens and we have all those people run in, we're already seeing a reduction in inventory, right? When we start to see that happen with pending still holding, generally we start to get back into that situation, especially in our area, where there is a lot of competition for a home. So we start to see multiple offers again, which again pushes prices up, raises everything to a new level. And the piece that I want to talk about on there, if I was a home buyer right now, knowing what I see happening, knowing that interest rates are coming down, knowing that when rates come down and more buyers come into the market, they push competition, which pushes positive price growth, right? And equity growth if you already own a home. So an astute buyer, especially the ones that bought this past summer that we spoke to, what they'll do is get into the market before that wave of appreciation hits and before that wave of competition hits, which is already starting if you're paying attention. So they come in at that point, jump into there. Then when they have those interest rates come down and they reduce as they're being foretold to do, when that happens, people come in, they hit that competition, your equity in the home that you own goes up, that you just owned, which is great to get that beautiful built-in equity. And you have the ability to refinance your mortgage to the lower rate. So now you're even taking your payment that you were comfortable with in the first place, lowering that to something lower and getting equity at the same time. So it's a win-win. The biggest thing that I would tell you to pay attention to out there is just supply and demand. So watch inventory, watch the absorption rate, which is a fancy term for the market heat, which is the percentage of homes on the market that are selling versus the ones that are sitting on the market. And of course, we have continuous market updates on YouTube. If you follow our YouTube channel, you'll see something in there always for that. So last piece I'll always talk about whenever talking about the market, which is important to know, is that there are microclimates. There's always microclimates. Location, in our area, Mountain View and Sunnyvale is basically the center of everything. That's where you're going to see the most activity, the highest appreciation in a short term or over time. And as you start pushing further out from there, houses become more affordable coming through there. Also, schools are a factor. So commute, right? If we talk about that location, commute and schools are two of the biggest factors for home competition and home values. And then there's always a difference between single family homes, condos, townhomes, how many bedrooms those condos and townhomes have. Those are all different markets. So one bedrooms slow down first, they heat up last. And then that goes in order with 1, 2, and 3. just so you're aware with that. So the last piece I would say about Silicon Valley is home prices. This is a great story to share. My father, who was the first generation realtor in our family, when he was in business, there was a home in Cupertino that sold for $100,000. And that was the highest sales price at the time in Cupertino, $100,000. And there was a sheer panic in the city. Holy cow, $100,000. We can't afford that. We can't sustain those prices. There's no way we can do that anymore. That same house worth about $4.5 million now. So a little bit of a change from that $100,000. It is sustained. If you pay attention to what our economy's done over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that $4.5 million house will be worth $8, $9, $10 million one day, right? We can't say when that it is, but it will happen. So just always keep that in remember. It's scary to get in. Once you're in, it's a wonderful thing, especially knowing that you have controlled costs and tax write-offs in the property that you have. So that is market. So hopefully that covered a lot. I'm checking to see if I had, nope, cool. I love the people that are on there commenting. Thank you so much for that. Continue to throw your comments in there. We really appreciate that. So the second thing that I wanted to get into was this commission thing. So let me just pop into here. And, there were some changes last year where part of the thought was, do buyers really now have to pay the commission for their agent? Because if you remember what the model was prior to the changes was that a buyer wrote an offer on a property and the seller was paying the commission for both the seller agent and the buyer agent at that point in time. So now technically buyers are responsible to pay for the commission of the buyer's agent. Now it can still be negotiated in your offer. And that's the important piece to remember. You can negotiate an offer with the seller and say, hey, I would like you, Mr. Seller, to pay for the buyer's agent's commission as part of my offer. That way you don't have to worry about having that additional closing cost, which obviously can affect the loan that you can get, the cash reserves you have on hand, and so forth. So remember that it's always a negotiation coming through with how that works. Our experience that I've seen, and Chris and Shannon will tell you the same thing, we really haven't seen a change in how it is. Most sellers are paying the buyer's commission. So it's always a negotiable number on what comes in. You write it into the offer when you put it through there. So it hasn't really affected the process. It's just an extra step. And what that extra step is as a home buyer now, when you're doing your home buyer journey and going through the process, just like a home seller, when they do their process and their journey, they have to hire the agent or realtor that they work with. They sign a contract together that they go through. Now the buyer has to also sign a contract with the buyer's agent as well. It's the same thing. So the question that you'll get and you'll hear a lot, or that you may even have, is when does this contract need to be signed? When does a buyer have to sign a contract? So the answer is legally, so everybody's aware of this, before you even step into a house. So if you were to walk into a house with a realtor, open houses don't count if it's not your realtor. But if you were to walk into a house with a realtor, they have to have a signed agreement with you to be able to take you into this house. It's anything that relates to the home. So even to discuss things like additions, permits, reports, disclosures, any of that, they have to have a signed agreement with you. They're not allowed to show you or give you advice on anything. So that's a piece. It even applies to like virtual tours. If they were to walk you through a virtual tour and talk about the property, it applies to that as well. So what do you do and what can you do? So there's a couple different things. First of all, before you sign an agreement with the buyer's agent, make sure it just reflects the terms that you've discussed with them, right? Look through it thoroughly, understand what's on there. Don't just sign something. Pay attention to what you're signing, right? And make sure you understand services and value that are being provided to you. That's important as well. So it's a significant change, but I think, in my opinion, it ensures a lot of transparency. People know what they're doing and getting into. So the one thing again to remember, open houses, it doesn't apply. That's an important note. So if you're just speaking to an agent hosting an open house or asking about their services, there's no written agreement required at that time. And there's two different types of contracts that you could sign with a buyer's agent that you choose to work with. The first one is called a single property buyer broker representation. You'll see that one referenced up there. So that's the very first one. It is great if you've never worked with an agent before and you want to kind of like test the waters, right, to see what's going on, because you can sign that to show like one property or two or three or whatever it is. But it's just a limited basis where it's not like, okay, Mr. Agent, I don't know you. I just met you. I don't want to be tied to you for 90 days. So can we just do it for one or two properties and see what information you're providing, what kind of research you're doing, so on and so forth. That's the first one. The second one is the buyer broker representation agreement, which is the longer term commitment. So that's the one that goes out, for, hey, here's what we're under. I'm representing you for X period of time, whoever that buyer's agent you choose is. Now that contract in the state of California cannot exceed 90 days. So usually what I say, start with one. If you're comfortable, go to two. You can always extend afterwards if you want to. And when you're selecting an agent, make sure you look for someone who will advocate for you and negotiate on your behalf. I can't stress that enough. So, policies are going to vary out there with the way things handle teams. I know here on the Walker team that we stand behind it, and we actually have a very clear-cut decision to make sure that our buyers don't pay commission out of their pocket, that they rely on the negotiation that we do. So make sure you have that conversation with whoever you work with. So hopefully that brings a lot of pieces and a lot of information to you. So that's the commission part. So again, any questions, reach out to us coming out of there. Be happy to go through there. Let's go to mortgage basics. And I'm just going to kind of give you a quick breakdown on here for mortgage basics coming through. Sorry that our slide is a little bit off on here. So I just want to start with a couple things to know, especially for first-time home buyers. Start with the core steps. So lenders look at your credit score. They look at your debt-to-income ratio. They look at steady income, and they look at what you've saved for your down payment. Those are the big pieces they're looking for. In California, it's theoretically possible to buy with as little as 3 to 5% using conventional or FHA loans, but you'll typically pay mortgage insurance up until you get to 20%. Other financing options you have are conventional loan. Those are popular with good credit, buyers with good credit, starting at 3%, again with PMI, and that usually applies if you're below 20% equity. There's FHA loans, usually 3.5%. We don't see a lot of those here in Silicon Valley. Other options are like a VA or a USDA. Again, those are military and rural area buyers, respectively. But here in California, especially in the Bay Area, many homes require jumbo loans. And what is a jumbo loan? It basically covers homes priced above the conforming limit, right? Which California statewide, it's just over 806,000. But in counties like Santa Clara County, it's just over 1.2 million. So for applying for a jumbo loan, they're usually going to require a credit score over 700, a bigger down payment, usually 10 to 20%, although there are some programs that are less. Your debt to income ratio has to be under 43%. And then more cash reserves and documentation, especially for like the complex tech compensation that's out there. So if you have RSUs and you're earning RSUs, right? Restricted stock units out there through your employer, lenders in California, there's quite a few of them that will count your RSUs as qualifying income. And usually the criteria they're going to use if you do that is at least 2 years history of vested RSUs from a publicly traded company, and proof that the RSUs will continue. So those are going to be the basis. And you'll see some people can qualify you, can boost your buying power, especially for jumbo loans, right? By lowering your debt to income ratio as well, or increasing your qualifying income. So we have great referrals as far as lenders go, and also have top lenders that will do a follow-up video with you if there's anything that you want to know more about this. So those are the mortgage basics coming through. And at that point in time, you guys have heard entirely too much of me talking. I hope it's been useful so far. So we're going to shift over to Chris right here, who I'm going to bring in with us, and shift him to talk about the home buying process. So Chris, take it.
All right. So yeah, getting to this point, just a little background here, this process can vary a lot, right? I've worked with people that are buying their first homes. That's always a fun educational process. People buy their second, third, investors buying their 10th home, right? It is a pretty streamlined process across the board, but every situation is different. But it does carry a lot of these very important parts that we're going to see here on this chart. So can we minimize me just a little bit here? There we go. So of course, starting off, you really just want to make sure you're interviewing multiple realtors, right? Everybody has that friend that's a real estate agent. We get all of these ratios and numbers all the time, and it's kind of crazy how many people go with the very first real estate agent they sit down with. And that's understandable because it's, life gets in the way and you want something that's quick and easy, but it's much better to like really understand what the playing board has to offer, right? And seeing what those differences are. Every agent has their own business, so everybody operates a little bit differently. So that's going to be number one. That's important there. We are always happy to share the questions that are good to prod people and kind of figure out what you should be looking for when you're interviewing those real estate agents. Sitting down with somebody up front is going to alleviate so many questions and time before you enter the market, because we've seen a lot of people enter the market, come back, and they're like, wow, I had no idea. And then they realize they should be adjusting their search, or maybe it's not the right time for them to buy, right? People will tell you sometimes, hey, it's always a good time to buy real estate. Every real estate investment is a good investment. Quite frankly, that's pretty wrong, right? It's very dependent on somebody's situation and really seeing how that goes. So always take that into mind when you're really considering this, especially as one of the biggest transactions that you'll do in your entire life. And it's important for, looking at your life down the line and seeing if it matches what you're looking for. So once you've sat down, done that, you should get a lot of references. Like a real estate agent's responsibility is to have those connections for you, right? Just as realtors are lenders, right? There's only a certain subset of them that are actually really any good. So you just want to make sure you're in the right hands. Don't make that mistake up front. So once you've gotten that, going into the idea that you have these references, right? You're going to want to go check your loan pre-approval. So just like I mentioned, when it comes to lenders, right, there's a lot of different types of lenders out there. You have big banks, mortgage brokers, right? You have credit unions, all of those types of things. So typically it's good to talk to a few. One of the biggest misconceptions, especially with going out and talking to lenders, is that you have a hard credit pool. So that is the case if you're actually trying to get something in. But when you look at the people that are looking at your credit score, and it really is in buckets, and we can always dive into that later. But what's important is when these lenders are coming across is if they're pulling that credit in a small period of time, the creditors understand that. So you're not actually going to take that big hit that everybody gets really worried about that'll affect their rate. Especially if you're already in like the 780 and up credit score, you're usually going to be getting the best rates out there. So the quick thing on those three, credit unions often are going to offer really great rates, but sometimes they have a hard time closing, which can really hurt you down the process. A big bank a lot of the time is going to give you some really advantageous rate options, but it's usually if you fit in their box. We find that a lot of clients that we work with tend to go with larger banks, but it's different for every situation. And then on the last side, you kind of have your mortgage brokers, right? And they tend to be able to get a little bit more creative, right? So if you have funds in different areas or you're trying to piece things together, they're great people to talk to on that side of things. When it comes to loan pre-approval, and I'll go over this really quickly too, this can go way more in depth than it usually does. When I'm sitting down with clients, it's usually one of the longest things that we talk about. But you're going to have a pre-qualification, which is just that upfront understanding of where your finances might be at, what you might be able to afford. And then you actually have your pre-approval, which is where you would submit documents and actually get approved to be able to go purchase a house. Without a pre-approval, in reality, you really shouldn't be looking at homes. And when it comes to writing an offer, if you don't have a pre-approval, you're not going to actually be able to write a serious offer that a seller would consider. And then one step further than that is actually what's called getting underwritten, which just requires some extra forms and things that need to be done. But that is good as gold that we like to consider. It pretty much means that, hey, unless something with the house is like really outstanding or there's something odd with like an HOA, right? You're pretty much in a position where you're going to get approved for that loan, right? So those are important notes when it comes to that pre-approval process. So moving on from that pre-approval process, right? Really just looking at our wants and needs in touring homes. One of the biggest takeaways that we usually give people is, especially in the Bay Area, I mean, there's so many like micro neighborhoods and places that you really don't know about a lot of the time. And so we usually recommend is have this idea of what you're looking for, whether it's a pros and cons list, just the basics, and keep that more of a widespread net when you're first looking, because you'd be surprised at how many spots you end up actually considering at the end of the day. It's kind of surprising. A lot of the people that sit down with us and end up buying something different than they were like zeroed in on when they first met with us is actually pretty crazy. So once you're going out there and touring homes, it's just important, like open houses, right? Especially having that agreement signed with somebody if you're going to open houses. You just want to make sure you let the agent know, hey, I have representation or I'm looking for these things. And they will actually tell you about the home itself, right? Rather than trying to earn your business one way or another. So those are important. Just take notes, look for things that the eyes might see. But when it comes to inspections, that's really where we get to know like under the hood items when it comes to those homes. So once we've gone through our touring process, say you found a home that you really like, the Bay Area market can move really fast. A lot of homes sell within a week, right? Depending on how the market's looking like. So a lot of the time it's, if you can get in there twice, amazing, right? But sometimes you're making this huge decision on that one viewing. So just make sure you're taking notes, like really paying attention to things, seeing what the traffic's like while you're going in there. And these are all things, of course, an agent can help you find out as you get prepared for everything. So as we're looking, you found that house, we're going to talk about making an offer, right? And so making an offer really does come to this one circle that we see in the middle there. That's due diligence as well. So when we're preparing to make an offer, right, what we really want to do is go through the inspections, understand what the competition is like, really like with a fine comb, go through the property inspection, the termite inspection, right? Any of the seller's disclosures, because that's where we're going to be able to find a lot of those red flags, you know, on whether this home might be a good buy or not, right? Or maybe there's a couple small issues that aren't as bad as they seem up front, and we can figure out what those costs might be to remedy that, right? And then that's going to help you decide what kind of home makes sense for you, whether turnkey, doing a little bit of work, or just taking on a fixer-upper yourself and doing what we call sweat equity, right? That's also an option. So when you're going and making that offer, there's a few things that you're going to need together. Is, like we said, that pre-approval is going to be important. And then under the offer, we have price, terms, contingencies, right? Those main contingencies are typically your property, your loan, and your appraisal contingency, right? And so we can always dive into those deeper. But in most cases, we'll see a lot of non-contingent offer situations when we know there's going to be more than one offer. So if we can get a contingency, amazing, right? A property contingency is great to have so that we can do further inspections. But if we're doing our due diligence, right, that's what becomes important. Like we said, with the title, inspections, disclosures, insurance, and especially with HOAs, we have to make sure they're in like good, healthy order. And there's a lot of things to navigate through those. Those HOA documents are very, very long, help you go to sleep at night, but we want to make sure we definitely check those out. So now that we've gone in, we've made our offer, a few things can happen. We can go into counter offers, we get our offer accepted outright, and we go through negotiations, right? So there's a lot of fine instruments that happen within those negotiations, and just having that negotiation experience and understanding how to go through that process is going to help make or break you actually getting your offer accepted and just being a strong buyer and making a smart choice at the end of the day. So say you get your offer accepted. That's the point where usually people are like, oh my God, what did I just do? I just purchased a house, right? So once that happens, if we have contingencies, we have a little bit more time to do our due diligence. But say it's non-contingent, at that point, that's your point of no return, right? You've committed to that property. And that's where what we do is we put down something called our EMD, which is usually 3% of the purchase price. And that comes out of your 20% down payment. So if I had $1 million house, my 20% down payment would be $200,000, right? About $30,000 to $30,000 of that would be the EMD that comes in initially, is pretty much your deposit to secure that home, right? And then later down the line is when the rest of the funds will be transferred over as the loan process goes. And then we talked about due diligence. Again, we're doing that through the entire process of you going through the home, right? If a new disclosure were to pop up that the seller had not given us up front, even if we didn't have contingencies, that's actually a point where we can go back and renegotiate. Say we found out that there was a big insurance claim on the house, or something had happened, or something while the house is under contract happens, right? Having very good knowledge of how the contract works and how these disclosures work can actually save you from a bad deal, or also give you that chance to renegotiate and decide whether this is the right fit for you. So now the next step that we're going to go into is really our appraisal. So going into it, the appraiser comes out and it's really on the behalf of the loan. And so the lender is only going to lend on the home based off of what they decide the value is. So most times, if you've done your due diligence up front, we've looked at our comps, we've understood what the value of the home is, right? Most of the time it's going to come in at appraisal. So there's no issue there. Now, the issue is if it comes in under the appraisal, right? So say we buy a home for $1 million, it appraises for $950,000. That $50,000 difference is something that you'll actually have to come up and put as an additional down payment down on the house. So that's something to always be careful of. Once again, knowing the market, doing that due diligence is so, so, so important when you're looking at homes up front. So now once we get the good news back on our appraisal, or we've renegotiated, or we've been able to kind of come up with a situation to alleviate any issues that have brought up, we're going to move on into your loan approval. So from that, most of the actual timeline of a home over time is usually up to the lender. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that you're really not going to be too aware of. A lot of documents to be signed, those types of things, but we're just waiting on the loan to go through. Most of the time, traditional closing times are about 21 to 30 days. All cash offers can be, as quick as a few days, quite honestly, usually around 7 days in that aspect. So once we've moved on to there, we've talked about renegotiating if we had contingencies. Once our day of contingencies is up, that's when we would remove them, and we would be all speed ahead pretty much, or we walk away. Like I said, thinking we can find things out later that become a bad situation, and that's where we would want to walk away in that situation. So now moving on, now we have scheduled move-in utilities. One thing that's really important upon this process now, especially with insurance in California, it's become a weird situation just with new laws, recent things that have happened. So it's important to really get your insurance all together when we're first considering the home and getting set up there. Also with movers, it's not, every transaction is different. It's not unlikely for there to be some type of delay or something to pop up. So if you're scheduling movers, just make sure you don't schedule them for like the day of close, because you might close a day later and then the movers might not be able to get back out there for another month, which is important for your timeline as a home buyer yourself. Now we'll move on into the final walkthrough. So usually you're going to get about 2 situations to be able to go check out the house, right? After we've gone under a contract. One, we can go in there, take measurements, all of that good type of stuff. But right towards the end, usually about a few days to a day before close, what we want to do is get in there, look around the house. The staging is usually removed at that point if there is staging. And we're just going to make sure there's no new holes in the walls, pipes haven't burst, right? And at that point, if we find anything, renegotiation, or what we do is we want to put something together to alleviate that situation and not move ahead to close. That's very important, because once you have closed, you really can't go and remediate any issues afterwards. So after our final walkthrough, now we're moving into signing closing documents. We live in California. Everybody loves to sue each other, so we have a lot of documents that we get to sign. You're going to see a lot that has popped up, but that's going to be signing the rest of your loan documents, making sure the net sheet is correct and all the numbers line up. And this is once again where your real estate agent is there to make sure everything is lining up to your best fiduciary sense on that side. Then, as we're going forward, just about a day or two before our close is about to happen, you're going to go ahead and wire the rest of the funds, the rest of your down payment in to go secure that house. That goes to escrow. So an escrow company is like a third party that makes sure that it doesn't go straight into the seller's bank account, so that we can mediate anything that we're seeing there. Usually we recommend doing a little bit over, and you'll get reimbursed for that just in case there's like a couple dollars off and it actually prevents you from closing on the home. So that becomes important as well. A good agent and a good lender will usually be there with you at the sign off just to make sure everything looks good. Just make sure that's reviewed and you're not just being told, hey, review these documents, right? Actually go through that with a licensed professional. And then after that, what we just wait for is county recording. Usually happens, by the afternoon, and you'll find out that you've closed on your first home, second home, or wherever you're at. And hopefully you get to celebrate a little bit. So that's really where it's at. You'll get your keys after we get recording, and then life moves on and you're on to the next step of the adventure.
Awesome, Chris. I love it. For those who haven't been through all of this process or seen it before, those who have been through know how complicated it is. The fact that Chris could reel that off in less than 10 minutes is pretty darn impressive. We've actually had gone through this flow chart with clients in like an hour and a half time frame. So lots more details, lots more than get covered on there. Chris, that was an awesome piece that's on there. Thank you so much for doing that. So that's going to shift us over to Shannon. And Shannon's going to come in and talk about ways to hold title. This is a common question we get. Now, we can't give any advice on how to hold title. That's the one thing that we're not allowed to do. But we can tell you about the different ways that are out there so you can start doing your research to see what's going to be best for you. So, Shannon, you are up. Take it away.
Thank you, Keith. You can hear me, right? Awesome. Okay. So in California, there's definitely some common ways for homeowners to hold title. Each has its unique legal consequences regarding ownership, the way that it transfers, and how it's inherited. And this choice does impact your taxes and future transfer considerations. So make sure you know these 5 main ways. Now, like Keith said, I'm not a lawyer or a tax professional, and I can't advise you on how you should hold title, but you can definitely dive in and do your own research here for your situation. And number 1 is sole ownership. This is where title is held by one person only, either single or married, as their separate property, giving that one owner full control of everything. And upon passing, the property is subject to probate unless it's placed in a trust. And we'll get to the trust later. Number 2 is community property. This is for married couples or registered domestic partners only. Both parties are going to own 50-50 interests. Properties do not automatically transfer to the surviving spouse, and probate in this situation is still generally required. Number 3 is community property with right of survivorship. This is also an exclusive to just married couples or domestic partners. And upon the unfortunate death of a spouse, the survivor automatically gains full ownership without the need for probate. This is a much more streamlined option for those married couples out there. Then you have number 4, which is joint tenancy with right of survivorship. This is for any 2 or more people, related or not. They share equal ownership interest. And when one owner dies, their share automatically goes to the surviving co-owner, also bypassing the probate process. Then you have number 5, which is tenancy in common, or TIC. 2 or more people own the property together, but not necessarily equal shares. There's no right of survivorship. Each owner can transfer or will their share independently upon death, and their share passes to their heirs, often also through probate. Some additional vesting and estate planning tools is the trustee of a trust, where a property is titled in the name of the trustee on behalf of the trust, which is commonly used for probate avoidance as well, privacy, and there's an estate planning process for that. So that, in a nutshell, is your 5 main ways to hold title in California.
Look at that, Shannon. That was impressive. So again, man, I love these little snippets on what we can pull off. Shannon and Chris, nice job pouring all that information into such a short topic. So pretty amazing. That's very useful information. We have lots of stuff available for that as well. Title company, attorneys, they can all answer that for you, accountant as well. So those are some good pieces to go through. Yes.
We've got a quick question from the chat. It's about the contract you have to sign before viewing the home. Did you want to tackle that now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's for sure. We can tackle that. So, and this is Alma has that question. All right, Alma, thank you so much for bringing that up. Let me tackle that. Give me 1 second. I got a couple little background things I have to do over here. And I will jump into it. So the question that had come out here is the contract that you have to sign before viewing the home. What does it consist of? So it's a great question, Alma. And basically what I could tell you is that you basically, for viewing a home, you have to sign a contract employing one particular buyer's agent to represent you for that particular home. So you can go into an open house and not have to worry about that. But if you're going into a home for a private showing with an agent giving you advice, or if you're walking into an open house with an agent that's going in there with you specifically, right, to go through there, not the host, then you have to sign a contract that says, hey, you are my real estate agent. If I were to buy this home, I would have to use you to buy this home. And then the contract will specifically state how much they're going to get reimbursed for providing that service to you, which again could be negotiable in the contract that you write. But it's basically something you sign. There's a term period on there. Some of the terms for that first contract can be just for that property. If it's a longer contract, then there's a calendar date term on there. So, but it's going to talk about compensation. It's going to talk about timeframes, and it's going to talk about specific properties. So hopefully that helps. So awesome. Thank you, Shannon, for pointing that out. Thank you, Alma, for the question. I really appreciate it. So I want to jump into negotiations. Everybody loves to negotiate. Who doesn't like to negotiate? Who doesn't like getting a good deal? So let's talk about what we do. The very first thing that I wanted to talk about in negotiations, which is honestly my favorite thing to do in this business, is that knowledge is power. So the more that you know about a situation, the more that you know about the comparables, the more that you know about the seller situation, the more you know about the neighborhood, the more you know about the way that the seller's agent operates, all of that, that's all power. And it's always going to put you into the best position. one of the things I've learned over time, when you walk into an open house and you talk to an agent, they're usually trying to get you to buy the property, right? So there's different things that they're going to say versus if Chris or Shannon or myself walked in and spoke to an agent or talked to an agent to get more information, they're usually going to share different things than a consumer to realtor conversation. So there's more that's told, there's more behind the scenes stuff that's there that will usually help in negotiations. So there's a couple different things out there, just like all individuals, all agents are unique as well. Some agents are super quiet and they don't like to share anything. So with nobody. So that's it. They're like, go for it, write your offer blind and we'll go from there. And some agents share too much. They'll give us information that's very, very beneficial for the buyer to make the offer or to negotiate. So we'll get both of that. So you really, when you're talking to an agent at an open house or your agent's talking to the seller's agent, you really have to listen to what's behind what they're saying. Sometimes they're going to talk a little bit vague and asking those continuous questions to get just a little bit deeper, to peel back the onion, if you will, is going to give you more information to help you in your negotiations. So what's the pricing too? And this is important for the negotiation. How is the home priced? Because there's not a standard for pricing a home to put it on the market. If you've paid attention to the market, you know, it's some houses are priced too low, some are priced too high, and some are priced just right. One of the things that you can do through research or your buyer's agent can do through research is to determine that seller's agent's pricing history, because they tend to have a method that they like to use. And so you can look through there and see what happens. So you'll know, hey, if this house is priced like $500,000 below value, wow, what a great deal. It's too good to be true. It probably is too good to be true. You can also see that if they priced it too high, that's also going to turn into something that's usually an opportunity. So watch those, because homes that are usually priced at market or a little bit low, they sell faster. And sometimes they have competition. Homes that are usually priced a little high will sit there for a little bit. They'll do price corrections, sit on the market a little longer. Whenever there's longer days in the market, people think something's wrong. It could, again, just have been that the house was overpriced to start with, as a possibility. So sometimes you can get a good deal on there. So know your competition, ask lots of questions. So try to see even if the buyer's agent can find out who the other agents that are writing offers are, because sometimes you know their strategies and what they do. That's also beneficial. Also, know what the seller's motivations are. This is really important. So if they need a particular closing date, if they need a period of time to stay in the home after it closes, what's called the rent back, if they're very emotional about the process, if there's particular costs that are like a pushing point to them, or if they want to sell what's called as is, they don't want to do any repairs, even if there's repairs that need to be done at the house, right? Those are all things that can be used as leverage. So use those to say, okay, I'm willing to buy as is, but I want a better price. So, or I'm willing to give you 2 months to stay in the house afterwards, but I want a better price, right? So depending on your competition and what's out there, those are all leverage points. So if you're trying to negotiate a certain thing, see if there's an area where you can give them something to make the negotiation beneficial for what you're trying to achieve too, which makes it a true win-win. And most negotiations, by the way, are a win-win for both parties. So just trying to find a way to put that together to help you is important. So the other thing that I would say, if you're at the open house and you talk to the seller's agent, first of all, make sure it is the seller's agent, because oftentimes when you go to an open house, it's actually not the seller's actual agent. So there's agents that will host open houses for other agents. But if it is that seller's agent that's in the open house, make sure they remember you. Try to find a way to say something memorable, create a conversation, talk about something, some manner that they're going to go, oh, I remember you, Mr. Jones. Thanks so much for coming to the house, right? When they can put a name and a personality and a family or a couple or an individual, if they can put that to an offer, it's going to help them when they describe that offer to the client that they're representing, the seller. So that way there's a little bit more of an attachment, a little bit more of an emotion involved, right? That helps sway that decision. So those are big pieces to remember in the open house talking to the agent. There's two other things that I wanted to talk about, which are important. One is knowing what your walkaway number is. And this is one of the things I hear when we see properties go into multiple offers. Quite oftentimes, people are like, well, I don't want to compete to get a home. Well, Silicon Valley, you're competing. So that's it. What you want to do is make sure you're not competing with yourself. And how you do that is if you see a home you've done all your research, you know what the value is, and you know what you're willing to pay for that house is, know what your walkaway number is. And what that walkaway number is, if there's an offer price and you're willing to pay X plus or whatever, or X minus, whatever that number might be, know that if somebody else were to buy that property for less than what you had offered and you didn't get it, you'd be frustrated, right? But if it were to sell for $1 more than what you're willing to offer, that's fine. They can have it, right? That's your walkaway number. If you're comfortable with that number, you're willing to pay that, you know it's there. It doesn't matter what the competition is. You know where your comfort level is. And if you get the home at that price, you're happy. So just be sure to know what that is. There's a lot more conversations that can be had in that as far as negotiation goes. If you're writing an offer planning on a counter offer, this is a common strategy that I see from buyers. They're like, I want to write an offer, but I want to leave room so I can counter and go back and forth and try to get where I'm at. So a counter is never a certainty. Sometimes seller's emotional. They don't want to counter. They're offended, whatever the case may be. It actually happens. So, and sometimes there's competition. And when there's competition and you're going through there, people are like, well, I'm going to write this offer. I'm willing to pay this, but I'm going to write this because I just want to get a counter and then we'll go from there. So one of the things that has been a fairly large trend, especially in our area over the last few years, is sellers agents don't do counter offers. So if they get 5 offers on a home or 10 offers on a home or 12 offers on a home or whatever it is, they just go, okay, this one's the best. This is the best price and the best terms. We're just going to accept this one. And they don't give anybody else a chance to write an offer. So some agents may do something different. Some agents may actually tell you too, oh, our policy or our practice is to give out counteroffers or multiple counteroffers. But you have to remember the seller is the person that makes the decision. So if they sit down with all those offers and the seller goes, no, I just want to take this one, that's it. Even if the agent said that they were going to write a counteroffer. So more likely than not, you may just have one shot to write your offer. So if there's a house that you really want and you're trying to negotiate on it and there's more than one offer, that's something that I just want you to keep in mind, because I hate seeing clients lose properties and I hate seeing home buyers that love a home lose a property over $10,000 or $20,000 when they were happy to have paid that price, but they were just trying to negotiate. And because they were trying to do that, somebody else got the house. And I unfortunately can share dozens upon dozens of those stories. So that come through there. So it's just something to keep in mind and remember. So, but that'll give you kind of a basis on negotiation. It's a fun thing to do. Some people are great at it. Some people aren't. If you're not great at it, make sure that the person that you're working with is great at it so they can do the best job for you. So that's when we're going to get into negotiations. On that one, we're going to bring Shannon back in again. So, and Shannon's going to talk about some tips for evaluating properties in neighborhoods like a pro. These are pretty valuable as we come through here. And Shannon, I'm going to pop this on and let you take it away.
Awesome. We have another question in the chat. We can answer it after this section. So we'll get to you, Elma. Thank you so much. All right. So evaluating properties in our area, we're definitely going to start with schools because it is one of the biggest drivers of property value in our area. Not necessarily just the school, but the district that it's in. The better the schools are, usually the more desirable the location and therefore the homes nearby. There could be like one street dividing a neighborhood that has 2 different schools, and the homes could be as much as $200,000 or $300,000 difference in values just because of the difference in schools. So even if you don't have school-age children and you're a buyer, know this factor for resale. Look at those schools or for future rental purposes as well, because those do affect value. Next is street location. Is the home on a through street, or maybe it's on a cul-de-sac? Maybe there is a stop sign intersection. There's going to be more noise at stop signs and traffic for those locations, but you might save money on the purchase price side, depending on how hot the market is in that neighborhood, of course. Which leads perfectly into noise and nuisances. Don't just tour a home with your eyes, but go in and listen. Close your eyes. Are you hearing planes, trains, maybe the neighbor's barking dog or neighbors talking, and really get a feel with all of your senses for that home. We can refer to the disclosures where the sellers might disclose those things, but you have to think after an owner has lived in a home for like 10 plus years, they may not even notice that they're right next to the BART anymore. But you're going to notice it as a new homeowner, at least for the first few months until you settle in and things become normal around you. Next is those views. They can obviously affect a property's desirability. Views of things like hills and mountains can mean a certain buyer might pay drastically more for that property. And also remember to look for negative views like power lines, power towers, and be aware of the lack of a view. In a townhome community, maybe some of the rooms in your townhome are staring into a neighbor's living room, for instance. Next is walkability. Some people are going to see value in being walking distance to major amenities like downtown and grocery, where some people are going to be more keen on being further away from downtown life. But if you're okay with further commute times, you might save money on the purchase side, being on the outskirts of central downtown locations. But just know your preferences and then set your search radius around that area accordingly. That leads perfectly into commute. I'm sure you noticed that the majority of tech companies where people work are in the heart of Silicon Valley, like Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Santa Clara. And the closer that you get to those areas, the more expensive the homes get. So decide how far out of a commute from your work that you want. And again, draw your search area radius accordingly. I usually recommend my buyers to drive that commute at the times of day and on the days of the week that they're going to be going to work to get a real, true feel for the drive that they're going to be living with for at least the next several years. Future developments. This was important. City websites are a great resource to find what permits have been filed for projects that are maybe still in the planning phases near or around that neighborhood. This can help you decide if it might help or hurt your future property value in the long term, but it's generally going to help your home value if it's projects like parks and schools and churches or community centers and that sort of thing. But maybe plans for government or industrial sites might be a different story. So really lean on your city websites for all of that type of news. Next is types of lots. And this is sizes and usability of the lot is important. Just a 15,000 square foot lot may not be twice as desirable as a 7,500 square foot lot if it's on a huge hillside with less than half of that 15,000 square feet actually being usable space. Shape is also important, like a pizza lot, when you're considering to build on square footage or maybe add ADUs. So really be aware of where those property lines are and how that lot is situated on its square footage. Next, we have hazard zoning. This can affect things like your insurance if you're in one of those high risk zones. And you can check out a document in the disclosures called the NHD, or the Natural Hazard Disclosure, for details on what locations a certain property will fall in. Property facing. This is a big one for a lot of cultures that practice Vastu or Feng Shui. Property direction. It can affect value, but not so much during like low inventory or competitive markets like we see a lot here in the Bay Area. It is possible that the market we're in now could pose some opportunity for buyers that are looking to be more selective on which way the property faces. But again, as we're coming into the holiday months, usually seasonally inventory decreases, so your options may still be limited, but it can affect value, property facing. Next is nicest home on the block. It's not always the best plan. Being the worst house on the block might actually be better for the value overall, because all of the bigger, more upgraded homes around it and the neighborhood actually bring up the land value, not necessarily the structure on the lot. You have to remember that the main value of your property is not necessarily the materials of the structure itself, but it's actually the land that it's sitting on. And this is one of the biggest driving forces in appreciation in our area, because we just have such a lack of new land to build on around here. And as we know, with low supply and consistent or strong demand, prices are going to tend to either stay stable like we're seeing right now, or they're going to trend upwards over time. Next is multi-units nearby. This one sometimes gets overlooked because you can see a property come up that looks like it's in the location that you really like, in the right zip code, right school, and you're like, why is the price so low? Make sure you're looking at the street that it's actually on. I love Google Maps or aerial view or street view, because you can save yourself time by just taking a look at the street. Multi-units nearby are going to be a big factor. Consider driving up and down those parallel streets if you do go, because a lot of multifamily or apartment complex nearby if they have a high concentration of renters in the area, it can actually affect value over time. The less rental turnover an area has, generally the better your value is going to be long term. Next is your cost of upgrades. Consider your cost and be realistic. A lot of homes are not going to be completely updated, so you want to be realistic about what it's going to cost to do that kitchen or that bathroom or the floors, for example. And a good agent is going to be able to ballpark cost of certain types of remodels and cost of new appliances, for instance. It's really easy, I've seen it a lot, for new buyers who just enter the process to really overestimate the costs of fixes and repairs and completely pass up very good homes just because they don't know realistic costs associated with those items. Next, talk to the neighbors. This is the absolute best way to find out the truth of a neighborhood. I've personally gone and knocked on doors of either side of the homes that my buyers were about to offer on and found out some very interesting things about the neighborhood that we would not have known any other way than if we talked to the neighbors directly. And then we're going to talk about due diligence a little bit. I know there's another section on this, but we'll touch on it here. Be sure to review all of the disclosures, the reports, all the documents that the seller is providing before you make the offer, especially on a non-contingent offer. But if there's no inspections provided, you got to get an inspection. It's essential. We've got all the references for trusted inspectors who we've worked with for many, many years. So due diligence is a very big one. Some quick parting thoughts before I hand it over. Remember, when you are looking at a property and you have a checklist and this house is checking a lot of your boxes, chances are that it's checking a lot of the boxes for other people as well. So if you find a home that you like, you're comfortable with that mortgage payment, make an offer. Don't let it pass. Why? Because that closing price is now going to be the benchmark for that size home in that neighborhood. So get in while you can, lock your rate, and then watch your value rise over the years to come.
Awesome. Wise words, Shannon. So very, very nice. Great information again. So well done. I know we had, Alma had another question here. Alma, we really appreciate it. I just want to touch on this real quick before I turn this over to Chris, and he's going to talk about the common mistakes that first-time home buyers make. So, but there was a question about giving an example of purchase price, down payment, monthly mortgage rates, and stuff like that. It's a pretty open-ended question. So I want to touch on a couple things. And then if you want to give me a little bit more clarity on specifics on the questions, I'm happy to answer that. We've helped people anywhere from $250,000 purchases to over $10 million as a purchase. So range varies all over the place. Some people we've helped with as little as 3.5% down, up to people that have paid all cash and everything in between coming through that route. And then the mortgage amount, the mortgage coming through will really depend on how much you're borrowing, what type of loan is it, what's your debt to income ratio, what your credit score is. All of those pieces are going to be factors on there that we can help hammer down when you talk to the right lender. But it's a pretty open-ended question, but I just wanted to touch on those topics so you could, if you had some more specifics based on that, throw those in the comments, and we'll do the best that we can to answer those in our Q&A after Chris finishes with our last topic here. So Chris, you're in. Take it away.
All right, back in here. So, of course, we're going over a lot of the common mistakes. We've had people that have done this, right? You get a lot of information thrown at you. It's hard to remember a lot of these things. That's why hand-holding becomes such an important thing, especially when you're operating through a process like this. So I know we have cost of upgrades here is our first one, but one I really want to touch on is just going back to interviewing multiple agents, right? Just make sure you're looking people up, go in there. There's a lot of things online today. It's really hard to figure out what's real, what you should believe in, what's the real deal, right? Just make sure you do your research up front. It's going to save you a lot of time and money. Just a really real quote out there, even just last year, right? 70% of licensed real estate agents didn't even transact one deal, right? And the average real estate agent sells like one or two. So if it were me personally, I would want to work with somebody I know is doing this on a consistent basis. So I cannot push that point home enough when it comes down to those things. So Moving into the cost of upgrades, right? This is once again going to due diligence, right? When somebody's working in the business, when you have contractors, et cetera, you're helping people flip homes, you're helping people understand the costs of these additions, right? That becomes important. A lot of people will overestimate what things cost, whereas a lot of people also will underestimate what things cost. So having these numbers ahead of time, right, and just having the connections to talk to a contractor and say, hey, what might this cost, is going to be really important for you to understand as you're considering a home altogether, right? New construction is becoming really popular as of lately. There's just not a whole lot of it out there. So especially when it comes to your budget, right? A lot of people decide, hey, it's better to get a little bit of, a discount per se on a home just for being able to do a little bit of work, as long as you have the right crew with you to take on those costs. Going in, waiving contingencies, right? If you don't need to waive contingencies, never listen to somebody that's telling, hey, we need to waive contingencies. If you are the only offer, there is no reason you should ever waive your contingencies unless you're striking up a really good deal with the seller and all they're asking you is for that level of commitment towards the home, right? And like I said, every situation is different. Just understanding what your best play in that situation is always critical. Going in there, having homeowners insurance, right? And going back to waiving contingencies as well, I just want to touch on that thing is, even, the day that your contingencies are up, if something seems odd, you just really want to have all the information together before you make that final push. You still have contractual obligations there, but we want to take those into consideration. Homeowners insurance, right? Like I said earlier, insurance is a really tricky game in some situations, especially with HOAs. So getting that started up front, even having conversations about insurance with your current insurance provider is going to be really helpful approaching that and understanding those costs, especially when it comes to understanding closing costs and those extra things that you're going to be paying on top of your down payment as part of the transaction. Nickel and diming, Keith, my dad talked about this pretty well, is we've seen a lot of people, we live in a very expensive market and there's a reason for that. A lot of people have passed on a home that checked off all their boxes over such a small amount, only to stay in the market for longer and then get outbid consistently. And then they end up paying more for a house at the end of the day that is, less in size or not as great of an area, right? So just be careful to, tread lightly when you're making those big decisions. Once again, waiting for a deal. It goes the same way. Like something pops up and, unless we're really seeing like a horrendous amount of inventory or something coming on, right, that deal is not as attainable as you might see. I've sat down with a lot of people in my time that wanted to get in the market. They were like right on that cusp of being able to afford what they wanted, and just waiting ended up pushing them out of the market, right? And a lot of these people end up not purchasing a home at the end of the day. And that's something that you don't want to fall into. If you are serious and this matches what you're looking for your future. Interviews, we talked about interviews. It goes the same. Real estate agents, lenders, just having multiple people across the board. Contractors are the same thing. You just really want to make sure you have a lot of that information up front. A lot of ins and outs to this that are specific. So if you really want to dive into this, we're always happy to sit down and really go over these things with you at a later date. Large purchases, right? This goes for the same thing. We've had clients in the past that have bought really nice cars, right? As they're trying to go purchase a house. You really got to consider your loan to value ratio. Go talk to a lender, understand where your finances are. You would be surprised some things that come up on your credit report that you were not aware of. So just be careful with that, because that brand new liability that you just bought can totally push you out from getting an asset that'll help you build the life that you're looking for long term. Again, budgeting, we talked about that. Just going into comps, understanding those costs, fees, things like that, that becomes really important. Pre-approvals, and this goes along with budget as well. Man, we have seen so many people that have went and looked at homes because they're like, oh, I think that I can afford this. They see this amazing home that they love, and then they realize, oh, that's actually just a little bit out of reach from what we can actually go and afford. What hurts with this, and coming from that psychology background too, is when you go into a beautiful house and you're like, wow, I love this. And then you realize that maybe that's not where you're at yet. You're going to be comparing every consistent house that you see to that amazing house that you saw up front. And it's going to be really hard to come to terms with what's realistic for your situation, right? We do have to be realistic about what we have in front of us. So that's important as well. Closing costs, like I said, I touched on that. A lot of that will be escrow, title fees, those things that get looped in. Your lender will be able to provide a lot of information for that, as well as your agent as well on that side. And then discovery and investigation. I drive this home so many times, especially when it comes to agents. If somebody just sends you disclosures or reports and says, hey, make sure you go check these out, let's go write an offer, that is a big red flag. You should be sitting down with somebody that knows what they're looking at and really going over everything with you so that you are very confident moving forward, especially with those non-contingent offers that we see a majority of the time here in the Silicon Valley. So those are a few of the common mistakes. I think we have some more, but that might be it. Let me just make sure here. Do we have a next slide on this one?
No next slide, Chris. Nope.
Oh, looks like we might have a little slowdown right now. Bear with us, everybody.
We got it. We've got no next slide. If you want to talk about a couple things, I think we got everything in there.
Can you hear us?
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, I can hear you. I might have cut out for a sec. That might have been me.
All good.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, perfect, Chris. Right on it. So nice carryover on there. So I wanted to break into something here real quick. If you guys, I know we gave a little bit of input there at the beginning. We're just going to wrap up here, give you a little bit more information. You just listened to advice from 50 years of experience in the real estate industry. So lots of good stuff to send out there, lots of good stuff for you guys to learn from. We've got a couple more. If you guys enjoyed this, like we said at the beginning, if you thought this was beneficial or you'd like to see it again, these are our next events. So January 22nd, again, a Thursday at 6:30 p.m. is our buyer workshop. Saturday, January 24th at 10 a.m. is our in-person seller workshop. Also, this Saturday coming up at 10 a.m. is our seller workshop as well for this quarter. Right there at the BayAreaWorkshops.com, you can find out more information about there, and you can jump into there. We'd love to see you coming down in that route as well. And wanted to hit on here. This is our YouTube. If you got a second, go ahead and scan that QR code or break into there. You can actually search us as well, Keith Walker Team or the Walker Team up on YouTube. We're always putting content up there, a lot of informative content, a lot of educational content for both buyers and sellers, also investors. We have consistent market updates going up there. We love to say it's the most watched real estate YouTube channel in the entire Bay Area. So we have over 18,000 subscribers. We have over 3 million views on the channel. So there's a lot of relevant content that I think you find useful. So pop on there, take a look at it. So enjoy the process that we have there. And then if you want to connect with us on social media, that is where you go in there. So come right in there, connect on social media, check us out. Work with all of us, see what we have to go, see what we have to share. So it's great to have 3 different opinions and 3 different viewpoints, all with a lot of experience that roll through here. So we appreciate all of you. Look at this, we got you out. We're 2.5 minutes shy of 75 minutes, as we said. So we appreciate you. Chris and Shannon, thank you for all your expertise on here and helping bring this home for all these people that got to learn so much today. So thank you, everybody.
For joining.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, everybody.